Hello. Hi, Anne. Good morning. It's March 24th, 2020, and we are pondering some more how to respond in this scenario, in this crisis, in a way that is both I would call it responsible as well as kind. And I know you and I have had a couple of challenges. You had a challenge, I have had a challenge on how to be with human beings in this time of, physical distances, social isolation, and all that kind of stuff. And so I really want to start unpacking this with you and share with our audiences some of the insights that we've gotten in the last week or so.
I know it's really kind of a moving target, isn't it? Yeah, one of our big words at Be Above Leadership is integration, because what we have seen in our research on effectiveness, which you can substitute the word consciousness for, is that it's a function of integration of various systems of the brain and the body. And one of those that we want to really look at today is how the right and left hemisphere of the brain can help us with an integrated response. Because I think that's the thing that will get us forward. And the part of what kicked us off is that one of our friends today posted on Facebook something like, it was actually really sweet, but it was also sort of heartbreaking. She said, my neighbors seem to be having trouble with social distancing, and how do I respond to the fact that they're having a garden party? I just went, oh shit. Because what I was aware of is there was part of me that was like, call the cops, just call the cops. And then this sweetness that she said, they seem to be having trouble with this. Like
yes,
this.
I really love that. I really love the kindness, but also this awareness of saying, well, should I be doing something about that or should I let it go? And I think this is such a hard decision because invariably we have to, we have to go to the grocery store. And even there, I feel like I'm going like, don't stand so close. And I'm standing like away from the cashier. And it's like, it's so difficult to know what to do.
And I think that's part of, we posted a video yesterday about exhaustion, and that's part of what's making it exhausting is how do we make these decisions? And so I think what we come back to is this interesting place of not going completely to one hemisphere or the other. So just a little bit, I'm going to share my screen, and we want to give you just a little touch of right and left hemisphere and the way that we have come to understand it from a neuroscience perspective.
Yeah,
so
let's do that.
Here we go. Share screen and play from current slide. So should I just walk through this a little bit, Ursula?
Yeah, let's walk through the four quadrants there.
Well, and I want to talk about, so the big picture, we have been told, and you probably have seen memes on Facebook, like the left hemisphere is logical and the right hemisphere is creative. And, there's certain energy to that, but the real truth of the matter seems to be more aligned with that they actually take in and process the world differently. So it's not so much that, when you're being creative, your right hemisphere gets activated. When you're being logical, your left does. Actually, the truth is, if you're really being logical, you're going to get both. If you're really being creative, you're going to get both. But they see the world differently. So let me do the little finger thing, and then we'll walk through the quadrants.
Oh, yeah, great idea. Yeah.
What this brings us. So if you put your finger in front of your face, and y'all can do, New Mexico is south, but I seem to have gone to Georgia or something. If you look just at your finger, Ursula, if you look just at your finger, what happens to everything that's not your finger?
It's all blurry. The background sort of is blurry.
Yeah, and that is a good metaphor for how the left hemisphere sees the world. It is the part of our brain that is keyed to details and specifics, narrowing things down, interpreting information. It's much more specific and precise. And then if you put your finger back up and you look past your finger, but not at anything in particular, what happens in your visual field?
Now the finger is blurry, and
Fingers blurry and
everything else now is clearer. The background, the bigger view that I have from where I am, that is sharp, and the finger is blurry.
so that's a little more how your right hemisphere sees the world, in that it takes in all the information, but kind of nothing in particular. So we say, okay, the left hemisphere sees the trees, the right hemisphere sees the forest. It's taking everything in. And this has an implication for our emotional state. And this definitely leads us to this idea why we think integration is so important. So let's go. We love to start in the lower right. And in our, what we've got here on your screen is, in our world, we talk about above the line and below the line, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. So Ursula, right hemisphere, let's do the right side first. What does it give us above and what does it give us below?
So in the right, it gives us from the affective, the gift of the right hemisphere, the big heading is freedom, which is bigger picture, oneness, meaning, present moment. You know, it's really, I mean, what I really love about it, it really is giving us the bigger view of the world.
Yeah, this very open state, taking in everything, and that very much includes taking in other people and
Yes.
their view of things. And, you know, there's words here: oneness, meaning, present moment, compassion,
Yeah.
empathy.
Connection, relationship.
A big part of our ability to really feel each other are mirror neurons for empathy in the right hemisphere. You need the right hemisphere for that. You need this open view in order to be standing in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
What's
Now,
the downside?
yeah, the challenge of that, of course, you know, the big heading of that is chaos, because if the, you know, if we take in everything, all the information, all the pictures, the emotions, if everything comes in, it can be completely overwhelming. So overwhelm is one of the subheadings, and that can really lead to fear, anxiety, depression, and this just general feel of chaos. It's all too much and the world is coming to an end.
I have to, you know, I'm laughing because right now my cats are indulging in chaos, playing in some boxes. Sorry for the background noise. The cats are having a chaotic time. But yeah, well said. It's this feeling of like, I can't filter anything out. The right brain is not good at filtering things out. So it can bring us to this overwhelm.
Yeah.
So, and then on the left side, what's the gift? I like you say the gift and the challenge. I think that's
Yeah,
really
the gift of the left hemisphere, you know, it's really because of the focus and the narrow view, it can really sort through things. So that enables it to actually be positive, because in all this what's coming in, it can hone in on one specific thing, filters out the rest, and can really go to this place of saying, if I focus here, all will be well. So that structure, analysis, focus, sense of direction really gives it this gift of positivity.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people get a little confused as, oh, because we tend to, myself included, we tend to sort of think of the right hemisphere as being a little nicer, you know, well, it's got empathy. And so, but why is positivity on the left? Positivity requires filtering.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
you've gotta say, nope, shutting off the news. You know, you were saying, I read my 5 things I need to know. That's it. I'm honing down. I'm not taking in everything.
Yes.
So I think that's a
And I
great
think,
point.
you know, especially these days, you know, being where we are, that left hemisphere gift of filtering can really be useful. Now, the downside, the challenge of it is, if we start filtering and honing into something really, really narrow, it can become really, really rigid. It's, this is the rule, it's the one rule, and this is what we're sticking to, never mind anything else. And that can also create a lot of, you know, anger, resentment, blame. And the interesting thing for me is denial. It's
Yeah.
like, nope, this is just not happening.
Yeah. That can be a function of, I think, an overactivation of one of the hemispheres, a disintegration, where they're not so able to kind of talk to each other and each play a role. And I
Yes.
think because you get this blame because you've stepped so far out of empathy, and that's for me, when our friend posted that thing about the garden party, and I was like, well, just call the, I was like, well, you should just, I'm not even Canadian, but bring in the Mounties, and that's very much from this place of, rigidity response. Now, there may be times where that is an appropriate response. I don't know for a garden party or not. I'm not saying yes or no on that. But to me, my response felt a little rigid. So one of the things that I want to say one thing, and then let's go into how do you respond to all of these important questions. But one other thing about right and left hemisphere is that if you are feeling chaotic and overwhelmed and really super anxious, you may find that your answer lives in structure. Focus, direction, filter some things out. Don't watch the news as much. That the left hemisphere decides what it will focus on and what it won't. It goes to that finger. Look at the finger rather than the forest. That can
Yes.
be really helpful. And what about if people are in rigidity, Ursula? What should they do?
Well, as I told you, I found myself in rigidity on Friday when I was close to locking my husband out of the house because he had come from some other place where he had to interact with a number of people, and I was really going to this place. Nope, he's not coming home. I'm going to lock the door. I'm going to tell him to just stay away. And so what I needed in this moment, and luckily I realized that before I had a chance to call him and tell him to stay away from me.
I love that.
That's awesome. I realized what I needed. I needed to look at the bigger picture, at the oneness, at the meaning. What was the bigger picture? And the bigger picture is that I've been married to this kind and generous and sweet man for 42 years. And it is unfortunate that his job has required him to put himself a little bit on the front line. But if I want to be empathetic and kind, there had to be a rule, but I couldn't lock him out. I had to be tapping into the bigger picture and my empathy.
Yeah, and then figure out how to do it.
Exactly.
And I think, allow for that emotional information. So, one of the other things I want to say is that we don't hold that the emotional information is wrong. It's part of what informs us. The nervousness may give you insight into how to make this decision. And that's important. So it's not that we just shut off the fear and everything like that. We have to sort of take into account, well, what's useful there? And how do I integrate that? So that's a great example. I had to just put a little structure in place and move the box into the bathroom because the cats were being a little too chaotic. They needed some rules. We need a rule. We need a rule about when we play with the box, when mom is on the, I don't know if you saw, just a total rabbit trail, but I've seen a couple of memes on Facebook where it says working from home and there's 2 or 3 children laying on the floor, like duct taped to the floor. And the mom is on the computer, and I just feel for those.
Oh my goodness, no, I haven't seen it, but I think I can identify. That has to be hard.
I know, I really feel for them. All right, so we're looking at this idea of what is the response that is both sort of kind, but structured and clear and is an integrated response, because I think that is, it's 2 things. One, it feels better. It feels like, I want to come out of this time knowing that I have been the best person I can in a really difficult time. I want to come out of this proud of myself. And the place that gets me more proud of myself is not chaos or rigidity. It's this integration of kindness, empathy, along with clarity, structure, and freedom. So
yeah, and I also think that when we can respond from an integrated place of structure and freedom, our decisions are going to be smarter. They are going to be wiser than, using one or the other, using one option versus the other.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. And I have an example of that. I'm going to stop the share here if I can do that. is that I think it also, people can hear it better. I
Yeah.
think people can listen to the decision, engage with the decision, et cetera. So here's one example that we have. As many of you know, I live in New Mexico, and yesterday our governor came on, and I happened to be, got an announcement. I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to watch her. Super impressed. And why I was impressed, when I was unpacking it later, and I called Ursula and, said I thought she did a really good job. And we've gone to now more of a state of, they're not calling it that, it's more like shelter in place, and the restrictions have gotten firmer. And I realized that what I was impressed by was her integration.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, I was watching it with one of my friends, and it really was very gracious. She's a gracious woman, and a smart woman. But I could tell, like, underneath it all, like if we were just having a glass of wine, me and the gov, it was probably like, oh my God, I can't believe people are doing these things. And like, how do I get them to stop? And there was probably a big part of her just would say, stop, you people, stop. But instead, what she said is, many New Mexicans are working really, really
Yeah.
hard to get
Yeah.
us through this.
Yeah.
And here is what we need. And we need to have compassion for our first responders, for our doctors, for our people in the grocery. We need to keep them safe. Feel the compassion.
Yes.
And she was talking about, we have a rule now, no more gatherings of 5. And she was like, and we do have some lovely, wonderful New Mexican big families. We do. We're a Catholic state. There's some big families out there. And so, and
Oh, that's so cute.
I know, but it was this gracious, and it wasn't smarmy, and it wasn't fake.
Yeah.
She loves New Mexico, and
Yes.
she meant it. But then she said, and I'm sorry, but you can't all go to the grocery store together. No more than 5. If you have a family of 7, somebody needs to stay home. Don't go to the grocery store together. In fact, maybe just 2 of you go to the grocery store. So there's structure.
Yeah.
There's this open, compassionate understanding. Here's what you can do. Here's why. And then here are the structures. But there was no finger pointing. It was all, we're in this together, and here's what we're going to do. I thought it was so easy to listen to. It captured my heart, and I thought, that's an integrated person. And I have become an even bigger fan.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that, what attracts me to those kinds of leaders and those kinds of messages is this beautiful integration also of logic and analysis, of saying, here are the facts as we know them from the experts, not called experts, but really experts, the scientists and the people that have the data. Here's the data. And here is the appreciation for the families, the first responders, for the state of New Mexico, and that gratitude and appreciation together with, here are the facts. I think a wonderful place.
Yeah, and we had the charts and graphs, and she had the head of the our Department of Health, so that was great. So how do we apply this to a question like, what do you do about the garden party, or what do you do about the guy that's standing, this happened to me the other day, standing too close in line at the grocery store, when we want to go either to chaos. And for me, chaos is when I think, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
I'm overwhelmed with, I don't even know, versus rigidity, which to me always feels like my mother, who was always pointing out what strangers were doing wrong. And I don't want to be that.
That is such a great question. And I think in many ways, there isn't a standard answer for everybody. But I think there are maybe some points or some hints. Like, for example, I try to go to the grocery store either really early in the morning or later at night. I try not to go right in the middle of the day when I know there will be lots of people there, and I am trying to stand away from the cashier. I'm trying to make a big, I try to keep my own space.
So I think that's great, because that's one way that you can, control the environment, bring some of your own structure in, use some of your logic and analysis. And I'm thinking also that the other thing is don't abandon one side of yourself, right?
Yes.
Don't, and I think for many of us who are more empathic, what we want to do is abandon the side of ourselves that is our own self-protection,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so the integration calls us to say, you can be empathic, but don't abandon this part where you need to take care of yourself. And what I wish I had said to the guy in the grocery store, and sometimes this takes practice, right? And thinking about it and going, okay, let me rewind that, because he was standing very close. What I wish I would have said to him from empathy and compassion is, um, I am I am practicing staying apart from people. I'm practicing some social distancing. So in order to honor that, could I ask you to step back? So I'm not blaming him. I'm not going to rigidity. I'm not saying, what the hell are you thinking, dude? You know, but I'm also not abandoning myself. And I think that is the dynamic tension
Yes.
of any response
Yes.
is compassion, but clarity and logic and all of that. And so, the garden party, that would be the challenge, would be, okay, well, what is both compassionate, but not abandoning logic and,
Well,
analysis and all of that.
and then there is also this question, if you're not directly involved and you are just, it is your neighbor, they are having a garden party, you're not going, you might not even be invited, but you're watching that, then what? Do we need to be the messenger of reason, or do we need to step back and say, you know what? That is ultimately their decision. And I find that really difficult.
I think that's particularly difficult at this time, and maybe it's part of what this virus is showing us, is that one person's decision ends up being everyone's decision.
Yes. Yes.
So, for example, if you play this out and you say, okay, they have a party and somebody there is infected and didn't know it or isn't showing symptoms, and then that means that that's 3 beds potentially in the emergency room. And then if I happen to get infected, maybe I didn't sanitize a package right, or I'm not even sure how far to take this. Then maybe that's not available, or it's not available for, someone else who critically needs it. So I think that's the interesting thing, which we always struggle with. It's like disciplining a kid on the playground. Are all kids our kids, or should we have hands off? And at what point, if we see, we sort of, like, if we see a child getting hit, we probably would do something. If we see a child getting yelled at, do we do something? Well, to what degree are we interrelated? And,
Yes.
I mentioned my mom, my mother, who's passed now and is much better in the angelic realms. She,
As
she,
we all will be, I hope.
we all will be, right? She lived largely in rigidity, I think. And so we would go for a hike, and if she saw somebody drop a candy wrapper or have a dog off a leash, she would read them the riot act. And, it was mortifying for all the rest of us, mortifying that she, would step in. But I think for her, it just felt so like she had to enforce the rules.
Yes.
So I'm saying this just to muddy the waters, because I don't think it's clear when it is. And maybe if she had said it in a more integrated way, maybe if she had said, something
Yeah.
that connected with the person before she yelled at them, before she said, there's a leash law requirement here,
Yeah.
something that connected, maybe she would have been less embarrassing and more effective.
And it's also, I think, maybe also, as you said, changing our language a little bit so that it doesn't become blame, because blame fits into rigidity, but really have this be about us. Like, I mean, the leash thing is a really good example. Is saying, the number one, there is a leash law, and I feel not safe when I see that people not don't have their dogs on a leash, because one doesn't know if the dog is friendly or not. So really having this be more about us rather than saying you are doing something wrong. I need to close the door really quickly. They're trimming the palm trees. So hold
We're
on.
just about, yeah, okay. We're just about done. I
Be
think
right
I'll
back.
talk. We got cats, we've got palm trees, the joys of working from home. But I think Ursula's point about the we, and I do tend to think of the right hemisphere as more concerned with the we, and the left hemisphere is more concerned with the I. And in these times, integration is saying, you know, look, I have some needs, and there is the we. The other point
Yes.
that I want to make,
You know what, I want to underline that because I really, really like that. You know, there is the me, but there is the we. And bringing these two things together, I think is critical right now.
yeah, I think that is, and I think a lot of people are trying really, really hard to do that. And I think that's absolutely, I think I see so much of this bringing out some of the best in people
Yes.
in this place of saying, how can I serve? What can I give? What can I do? How can I be part of the we? The other thing I just want to kind of maybe close with is this, that standing in integration is not what we're programmed for. It's not largely what's modeled. I think the New Mexico governor, I think there's some other
Yeah.
leaders that are modeling this right now. There are also other leaders who shall remain nameless who are not modeling this. And it's not necessarily really pointed out or celebrated in our society. So there's not a lot of role models of how do you do that?
Yeah.
And so be awkward. What I would say and what I want to charge myself with is be awkward, practice this, hold this, don't abandon either part, and figure it out, because it's not that there then becomes this magical clear answer. There probably becomes an awkward conversation. But the more you practice responding from integration, we think the better results you'll have, and you'll feel better about who you were.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really going to take on the challenge, and I think one of the reasons why I have been so wishing that our leaders would just put their foot down in a more rigid way is to help me abdicate my responsibility of having to put rules in place that, you know, impact others, because I am finding sort of my own physical distance and you know, isolation, that is not a big deal for me. It's that I don't have a problem with that, but interacting with the world in that way, when the guidelines are constantly shifting and very often from our top leaders are not clear or muddled, I find that really, really difficult. And so it's a good challenge to have and go out in the world and saying, how can I honor me and honor the we?
And honor the we.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ways you can honor our we is by subscribing to our channel. So hit the subscribe button, because this is new for us, and we would just love to be able to keep bringing you this brain-friendly way of navigating these interesting times. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you very much. Take care.